Okay, we're going to get started here with our lunchtime General Assembly. So, how's the lunch? How's the food? Good food? Yeah, you've heard me say it all over the room. No rubber chicken at Western Liberty Network. We'll always have some good food for you there. And how have the breakout sessions been? Good? Excellent. I want to encourage you to, or I guess remind you, to fill out your evaluation sheets and leave them at the registration table. They will help us improve our program next year. Now, this is a time, it's one of my favorite parts of the conference, and it's when we recognize people who have shown excellence in one aspect or another of public service or activism. And I would like to give the first award to somebody who's not here today. He's not feeling very well, and he's 85, and they're taking good care of him today. But John Bryan is a friend of mine. John Bryan is a hero to the limited government movement. He's the one I mentioned before who himself financed a network of 15 charter schools in North Carolina, 2 in Indiana, 1 in Arizona. Let's give him a hand for that. He's going to get a recording of this. And that's just skimming the surface. He's involved in energy. He's involved in public policy. He knows Mike Pence. He talks to these folks. And, you know, I met him, gosh, I guess it was like 2012 is when he got involved. And he was mildly curious about Western Liberty Network and what we were doing. Small ball, you know, compared to the multi-million-dollar projects that he has. But he said to me one time, you know, I've been kind of waiting. I can kind of help keep you alive, thinking that we'd work together on something at some point, and we finally are. And he has become a tremendous supporter, not just in terms of helping Western Liberty Network financially, but he's been a mentor and a teacher with how to run a nonprofit organization, how to raise money, how to organize things. My wife, who's a marketing professional by trade, she learned a lot from John. And he's, you know, my grandfather passed away 25 years ago. He's probably the closest thing I've had to a grandfather since that time. So he can't be here today. He tried to make arrangements, but it didn't work. And so I have this. It's just a certificate piece of paper, but it's symbolic of his great contribution, not only to Western Liberty Network, but the limited government movement. So this goes, the Ayn Rand Memorial Award for 2019 goes to John Bryan. A lot of work in political activism isn't high profile like that. A lot of it is down in the trenches. I think almost everyone in this room knows what I'm talking about. And there are people that are always there. If they get into a car wreck, they're always there. You know, they show up for everything. They're dependable. They're gold. And one of those people is the winner of the 2019 Don McIntyre Memorial Award for Excellence in Political Activism. And this goes to Roxanne Ross. Here's Roxanne. Now, come on up, Roxy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she says I have no idea. Nobody ever has an idea.
Well, thank you.
Let's get a picture. Be very good.
Well, behind every activist is a lot of people who come out and help with some of the zany ideas we come up with, or help in the war room for Oregon Citizens Lobby. And if you haven't checked out Oregon Citizens Lobby, that's stuff you can work on in the comfort of your home with a computer to help us analyze bills and give grades. To our, so you really ought to check it out. It's wonderful. Freedom Works, wonderful. WLN, wonderful. But it's really the people that come out that work for us. It's the grassroots that make every activist successful. So thank you so much.
You know, somebody said to me once that WLN conferences are a little bit like summer camp. You know, you get together, you see your friends, and you see your compatriots, and have a great time, and then everyone's a little sad when it's over. But I don't think you'll be sad when it's over this time, because you'll be exhausted when it's over this time. We're feeding you a fire hose of information. The next award is for outstanding. It's the 2019 Milton Friedman Award for Outstanding Western Liberty Network Independent Affiliate. Western Liberty Network has affiliated 19 organizations in Oregon, 4 in Washington, and 1 in Texas. We're going to try and reach every corner of the country as soon as we're able to do it. But there's one organization, they've had their ups and they've had their downs, but they've always been there. They educate people not just in how to be a good political activist, but they educate them about the issues. They educate them about the Constitution. They do all of these sorts of things. And for this year, there are a lot of good affiliates out there. But for this year, I think I have to give the Outstanding Affiliate Award to the Cottage Grove 912 Project. Right. So, Bob, would you be willing to come up and say a few words? Yeah, and also, he cut his beard, and so I was also going to give him an award for looking most like ZZ Top. We'll do that. Here you go.
Well, gee, thank you.
Let's get a picture.
Well, thank you, Rich. On behalf of the Cottage Grove 912, we're having our meeting on Tuesday, and I'll be presenting it then. I know we really appreciate it. You know, it's hard for groups to meet every month, twice a month. We've been doing it since 2009, so it's been a long process, and we really appreciate the work that Western Liberty Network has done. They've spoken our group many times, and thank you so much.
Let's see, which one did I do next here? Okay. This is one of my favorite awards, too. It's the annual Admiral Grace Hopper Award. And if you don't know who Admiral Grace Hopper was, she was an admiral in the Navy, but she was a computer expert, one of the first computer programmers, wrote one of the first computer languages. And she was a true innovator at that time, and actually one of my heroes, along with Carl Sagan and Mr. Rogers. And so I've decided to create an award, this is the second year we've had it, that is for innovation in electoral politics and grassroots work. And this year, I would like to give this award to State Representative Mike Neerman. Okay? Mike Neerman, he's done work through Oregon Citizens Lobby to provide the technical background. He provided the sheets that you have today on what you're eligible to run for based on where you live. And he is a tremendous asset, and through his technical innovation, the grassroots movement is stronger. Thank you, Mike. It's okay.
Dropped my award there.
Hey, I want to say something. Is in the year 1950, in the state of Oregon, 97% of all registered voters were either a Democrat or a Republican. Can you imagine trying to win elections in that kind of environment? And so we have a gift that we've been given, the gift of motor voter, the gift of non-affiliated voters. And that's a huge well that I don't think we can ever drink dry. And I'm working on software solutions to go tap into that well so we can turn Oregon around. So we'll look forward to seeing some of that soon.
Technology. Mike is giving us a tool consistent with the theme of this conference, taking the offensive. Thank you very much, Mike. Now we have one more award today, and it's a new award, and I named it after a friend of mine who died last year. You probably know Adam Mayer. Good friend, gold activist, brilliant mind, fantastic sense of humor, personal integrity that you rarely see in the world. And I want Chris to give out the inaugural award. Chris is Adam's wife, and Adam passed literally weeks after they adopted a baby girl named Edith 10 months ago. And so I asked Chris if I could do this. She said yes, and I'd like you to give the first one.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to try not to cry. For those of you who knew Adam, you knew that there was no way to describe him in a word. So, good luck. Richard said, say a word or two about him. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. Well, my Edith is back there. And she was his shining light. She was his reason for getting up in the morning and going to bed at night. And he was a dad for 4.5 months, and it was the best 4.5 months of his life. And I thank God every day for her. When Richard came to me and said, I want to name an award after Adam, he wanted it to be an activist award. And at his heart, Adam was an activist. He was an activist for liberty. If he was standing up here instead of me, he would ask every single one of you, are you running for local office? Oh, you're not? Who are you helping who is? You all have the list, and he'd say, open your packet, look at the list, pick an office, and do it. Because that is how you make change. That was his biggest thing. He wanted to make change. And so as we thought about, okay, who? One name came to my mind, and that was former State Representative Julie Parrish. She made changes in Oregon. And when she lost on election night, I said, uh-oh, the Dems are going to be sorry. Now, I know this is a nonpartisan event, so I didn't say that, but State Representative Parrish has made changes in Oregon and continues to make changes in Oregon. And when we inaugurated this award, I wanted to pick someone who was a trailblazer like Adam, who you could not put into a box and say, this is who they are. I don't have my glasses, so I don't know what this reads. Small things like reading glasses. But I'd like to present the first 2019 Adam Mayer Memorial. I now have reading glasses. 2019 Adam Mayer Memorial Award for Excellence in Public Service to the Honorable Julie Parrish. Has served in exemplary fashion during her tenure in the Oregon House of Representatives, faithfully fighting for personal liberty and government accountability while staying connected to the limited government grassroots activists. I think that describes not only State Representative Parrish very well, but also my husband. Julie?
Don't cry or you're going to make me cry.
Good luck with that. Edith is the only one allowed to cry. She's one.
My favorite memory of Adam, we do a dinner at my house called Thanksgiving in July, and we literally cook Thanksgiving for 60 plus people, and Adam's like, I'll take that turkey carcass home if you're not going to do anything with it, because we're not going to let things go to waste. So when you talk about accountability, it was in every aspect of his life, and not just for government, but how we just even use our own personal resources, and so he's definitely very missed. And you're doing a great job of keeping him alive for us. So thank you. I really do appreciate this. You're right. The fact is I did lose on election night. People are like, are you sad? I'm like, well, I lost an election, not a kid. There are other ways to serve. A lot of you do that all day, every day, in your own communities, going out doing grassroots work, putting your names on ballots, making sure that we are constantly using all of our networks to hold people accountable. And this next legislative session, there's actually part of me that's glad I don't have to go down and take all those terrible votes because they're horrible. Thank you, Mike, for willing to carry that torch for us because it's bad. And our job as activists is going to be to go out and educate people about whether it's tolls. I think there's a bunch of ballot measure petitions here for stopping tolls, for no pension debt. There's good things that we can get involved in. And so my word to my Democratic friends was, be careful what you wish for, because it might come true. And now I am freed up to go do lots of things I could not do as a state representative, so I am not walking away. Appreciate people like Newt Buehler, who is using his resources to not walk away. As elected officials or people who've been elected, our job is to stay in the game and stay and fight with you all. So I appreciate this today. Thank you. It means a lot.
Julie is at heart an activist, and even though she's not a state representative at present, she is active. She is an activist who happened to get elected to to the legislature. When she lost, I kind of thought of that famous scene from Star Wars, where Ben Kenobi and Darth Vader were fighting, and he says, "You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I will become more powerful than you can ever imagine." And you heard her say it. Now she's free to do all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So she's our Ben Kenobi of Oregon politics, right? I want to say one last thing about Adam. Chris said that you can't pigeonhole him. And that's true. He was a Republican at the end of his life, but he was a Libertarian, and he was state party chair. And he was my campaign manager when I ran for governor in 1998. And I remember one funny story is when I had the press conference to announce my candidacy down in Salem, I was dead tired, like I am now, but excited. And I just said, without checking with Adam, I just got full of energy, and I said, "We will campaign in all 36 of Oregon counties." And yeah, that's right. And afterwards he goes, "What? You are so dead." And I understand why, because at the end, I love these places, so please don't get me wrong, but I said, "Adam, we need to finish up Heppner and Wheeler counties. We need a media campaign in Heppner and Wheeler County." And so the mayor was a supporter of Fossil. And Buck Leckie, who was the mayor of Spray, he was also a supporter. So I said, okay, this is friendly territory. So we go down there, and there's no TV, no radio. And so how should we campaign? And the mayor says, why don't you just shake hands, go down Main Street, about like 2 blocks. And Adam and I, we were in suits like I am now, which doesn't fly too well in Wheeler County. So we went into a gun store. And we said, hey, Second Amendment, this is us. We're going to go, meet a friend here. And so we come, and this really old guy comes out like this. And I said, hi, my name is Richard Burke. I'm running for governor. And he looks at me like, what? And I said, yeah, we support the Second Amendment. And he looked at us and didn't say a word. And then I lost my composure and said, yeah, we support the Second Amendment and all that stuff, which is exactly how you want the governor candidate to talk. So, turns out he thought we were ATF agents. When you run for office, you compile a bunch of stories like that, but that was one of my favorite stories with Adam. So thank you very much. And we'll never forget him. But we are going to move on, and it's hard to follow that, but I know one person that can. I am very proud to count Lars Larson as a friend. We don't spend a great deal of time together, but we connect well. He loves my wife. And by the way, by that I mean he has a lot of admiration for her. She just got her U.S. citizenship in October and loves this country. She was a protester in the Soviet Union. She was in the protest tent with Boris Yeltsin when they were firing cannon rounds into the Parliament building. And she is very active and loves this country. And her daughter became a citizen in March. And Lars was kind enough at the Reagan dinner to recognize her and give her a chance to speak. Also, I forgot to mention one more thing. Lori Hine here told me that the Washington County Republican Party set up a $1,000 scholarship in Adam's name. So thank you for doing that. Yeah. So I didn't want to forget that. So anyhow, Lars Larson doesn't charge money for his speaking engagements, although he could command thousands and thousands of dollars. He is an institution in this part of the country. You see him on Fox News sometimes. And, I don't know how to thank him, but I did find out he was a fan of single malt scotch. So to say thank you, I got him this. It's a Macallan 12-year-old sherry oak cask. I don't know a lot about single malt scotches, but everybody told me this was good stuff. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Lars Larson. Thank you for coming.
Richard, thank you. Unexpected, unnecessary, but appreciated at the same time. I'd love to spend the rest of the day with you, but having met Edith this morning, I have to tell you that my granddaughter is visiting, and she celebrates her third birthday on the 1st of April, and so I have those priorities, and I know that you all have those priorities as well. But it is a pleasure to be with you today, because this is important, what you're doing. I dream, like a lot of you dream, that your kids and your grandkids are all going to have the kind of opportunities that we knew, and hopefully better opportunities. And so what you're doing is essential to that. And I thought an awful lot of what I do on the radio every day, and Richard thought I need another half an hour today in addition to the 30 hours I do on the air every week. Another half an hour of me. That's what America needs. Okay, I'll take the invitation. I'll take it. And since Richard mentioned movies, I thought I'd mention a movie that's it's not maybe the top of my list, but it's very near to the top. And it's only a couple of years old. Some of you may have seen it, some of you may not, but I have an interesting history with it just in terms of loving this story. And it does connect to what you're doing here today, so bear with me. There's a guy by the name of Andy Weir, and he's a scientist and a technical guy. And a number of years ago, I read this book that he had written, and it was this obscure little downloadable ebook on Amazon. And it's also an example of what you can do when you don't have all the tools. You say, well, I could do a lot if I just had a giant organization and a lot of money and all kinds of people. Andy Weir decided to tell a story, just because he thought it'd be interesting to tell a story. And he thought, I'm going to put a person in a very, very difficult situation. That doesn't even describe it, because he said, I'm going to put a person in a position where he's going to die if he doesn't solve the problems around him. And he's on his own, and it became called The Martian. It was a movie that Damon was in. I don't like Damon's politics, but I like some of the movies he's in. And here's what happens. He puts him on Mars with a bunch of other people, and they're scientists, and then there's a big storm, dust storm, and they all leave thinking he's dead, and he's stuck on this planet by himself. Now, the story he wrote, he began crafting this story, and he would send out to an email list of his friends, and they would pick it to pieces and say, this is wrong and that's wrong, and he wrote it to be technically accurate. Like a lot of stories that we like in movies, he keeps putting the hero into an impossible situation, which the hero figures out how to solve, at least for the moment, and then throws another wrinkle at him in the next chapter, and another one, and another one. And he wrote this book, and finally he got so many requests for copies of it from people saying, my friend wants to read this thing you're writing. And he wasn't intending it to be a novel or a movie or anything else. And he contacted Amazon and said, what's the cheapest price I can put on a book and have it available on Amazon as an ebook? And they said 99 cents. Imagine this. This is a guy who's now made a considerable amount of money, but he just wanted his friends who wanted their friends to read it, which is a lot of what you do in your political activity. And so they put it up at 99 cents. And it started selling like crazy. So a publisher contacted him and said, we want to make a book out of it. And then movie producers contacted and said, we want to make a movie out of it. We want to put Matt Damon, one of Hollywood's bigger stars, despite his weird politics. Again, I can forget about the politics. That's what we go to the movies for anyway. And they made a movie out of it. And the reason I find it, and the reason I want to bring you a sense of optimism today, is I could stand here like I do in front of a microphone the rest of the week and tell you all the things that are wrong. But one of the rules I've tried to abide by for at least the last 20 years is if you're going to tell people what's wrong, tell them how to fix it. Otherwise, you're going to, first of all, you won't get invited back for a lot of conversations. They'll say, oh yeah, invite Lars over. He'll bring the whole party to an end very quickly. He'll tell you all the things that are wrong. I am an optimist at heart. I try to pattern myself after the happy warriors out there, and there are a number of them. They all have their flaws. Newt Gingrich is a happy warrior. I don't agree with everything Speaker Gingrich does either, but I look at what he does and I say, he's working the problem. And I'm not ruining the movie to tell you that The Martian does end well. And it ends with Damon standing in front of a class of young astronauts. And it almost brings tears to your eyes when he stands there and he says, you're going to do this thing. And someday you're going to find yourself in a situation where if you don't work the problem, you're going to die. And he said, yes, I did find myself in that situation more than once where I had to work the problem or I was going to die. And yes, I did grow my own food out of my own waste. And yes, I worked the problem. But he says you have to work the problem. Even when everything is stacked up against you, and you know to a fair certainty as a scientist, you know this situation is likely to kill me. And maybe sooner rather than later, but I'm going to work the problem anyway. And that's what's required of us, is to continue to work the problem. I mean, we can talk about our national debt, we can talk about national security, we can talk about the great threat that is posed by uncontrolled in-migration and the political effects that it has, and the economic effects and the social effects, and those are all the bad news. The good news is we can work the problem. And I want to encourage you to work the problem. Because you can say, well, I'm one person, or I'm one person with a small organization, or I have a website, or I have a Twitter account, or an Instagram account, or a Facebook page. How much can I get done? Well, if Andy Weir had done that early on, I never would have read a great book, and they never would have made a great movie, and he never would have had the phenomenal success. He is now no longer working as a technology guy. He's now writing books for a living, and they're making movies out of them. And we've had an interesting couple of months, and I want to bring a couple of recollections of that to you and suggest that they actually suggest the solution. Sometimes the problem suggests the solution. For example, we've just gone through a massive government shutdown. One whole quarter of a massive government shuts down, and to watch the nightly news from the mainstream media, you would believe that Western civilization was about to come to an end, that 165 million of us still go to work every day, but if those 800,000 people are not on the job, it's all coming to an end. Well, it isn't coming to an end, but it does suggest part of the solution. I would like a smaller government. I would like less regulation. There's an old politician from Portland named Frank Ivancy who was mayor of Portland back in the day, and he had all kinds of interesting quirks to him. One was that he liked words, and one of the words he liked best was Fingerspitzengefühl. And I've actually tested this on some friends of mine who know German. I don't know German. But what he said it was lightness of touch, right? And it meant that if you ride a horse, and I've ridden horses, I'm not the best, but I can ride horses, you learn very quickly that the way to ride a horse is not to grab the reins and just start yanking them as hard as you can. The way to ride a horse is to have just enough control that the horse knows who's in charge, in the case of riding a horse, and not so much that you're just pulling that bit into the horse's mouth every 2 seconds, because he's bigger than you are and he will get even if you do that. I wish that while government is not our master, government is supposed to be our servant, that the government took the same approach. What is the lightest touch we could have on the citizens of this country and still protect lives, protect national security and the like? And one of the ways to do that would be if we had government agencies that actually took that approach. A friend of mine likes to say that ducks quack and dogs bark and regulators regulate. And one of the dangers of government is that when you set someone up to regulate, they don't say, well, we have enough regulation on here. We have that lightness of touch that a good sports car, a good race car driver has, that a good horseman has. We're going to regulate. And every day we're going to come to work, and when we think we've written enough regulations, well, there's tomorrow or Monday, and we're going to go in and regulate some more. They do not follow that idea that it would be better if you said, we've regulated this industry enough. In fact, maybe we could take some of the things that this agency does and regulates, and if we could go to the industry itself or some of the groups that represent the industry and say to the meatpacking industry, I tell you what, instead of having all these government regulators in there who are civil servants who effectively can't be fired, which means when they screw up, people may get sick, people may die, but they will never lose their jobs. In fact, we're so generous with civil servants that even when they're off work for a month, we give them a paycheck. And they're literally debating right now, after this big government shutdown, the idea of saying, and there are a bunch of private contractors who work for us too, and they didn't do any work for us in the last month, but why don't we pay them a paycheck too? I'm not kidding. That's the Congress is debating whether we should send paychecks to private sector organizations that are contractors to the government, janitors, computer coders, whatever, and say, even though you didn't do any work, we have this big, well, we don't have a big treasury. We have a treasury that's actually running a $900 billion deficit this year, but we're going to send you a check anyway, even though you didn't actually do any work. Now, I've never worked for a private sector employer that does that. I don't know of any who do. There might be a few out there who say, the plant has to be shut down, but I'm going to keep the paychecks going because he or she understands it's good for business. You got to hang on to your valuable people, and they're going to leave if you don't pay them, but that's a business decision. I don't think anybody who works for the federal government is going to say, well, gosh, I got shorted a couple of weeks of pay, so I'm going to leave this great job that pays better than the people we serve, has a better pension, better medical care. I'm going to leave this and go out into the wide world of the private sector where you are paid based on the results you produce, and when you screw up, you get fired. Believe me, I've seen too many people fired because they screw up. So I'm going to suggest that one of the solutions we can look at is to have the government downsized both by the deregulation that is going on now under President Trump, and he's produced literally billions of dollars in savings that translates into paychecks for you, and if not for you, for your sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters who work for private sector companies. When you don't hit them with unnecessary regulations, they have more money to expand, to pay their people, to do research and development, and that's something the government doesn't do very well. So for lovers of small government, and I'm one, and I suspect that because you're here at WLN, that you love small government too, and light regulation, that's a solution that's suggested. Now, how do you work on this? Taking the offense is the best way to do it, and I'm now thinking of it in terms of the Martian. Work the problem, whatever the problem is. Now, you can self-defeat and say this is a problem that is insoluble. That's self-defeating. It will get you nowhere. It would have got Matt Damon dead on Mars, and that would have been the end of the movie very quickly if he had taken that approach. I'm in an impossible situation. I can't possibly save my life. Every bit of my brain that's scientific says this is going to kill me. Why don't I just sit here and wait for the end to come? And in an environment like Oregon and Washington, I can see where some people have taken that approach. They are conservatives and they say everything around me is not. But Richard is right, and Mike Neerman is right to say there is an untapped reservoir of people out there who no longer identify with the Republican Party, and I find myself identifying with the GOP Party more and more. I'm still registered as a member of the Republican Party because I like to vote in the primary. But I'm first a conservative, and a fair amount of libertarian in me that says leave me alone as much as you possibly can, and things will be better. So I want you to take the offense and work the problem. And it drives me nuts when people talk in these lofty ideals, and just go out and work the problem. How about some practical suggestions? I get a chance to get 30 hours of airtime every week, 15 of it in the Northwest, 15 of it nationally. You say, well, you have a great opportunity. Well, I do, but all I'm doing is talking and throwing out ideas and making suggestions. And Mike was nice enough to say to me that some of them actually get to the legislature and will get good conservatives kicked off of important committees because the legislature right now run by Democrats doesn't like conservative ideas. But one of the things I'd like to suggest you do, and it seems kind of obvious, is to run for office. Now, the office, as everybody who calls me and emails me seems to be interested in, is Congress or the legislature. But I'm going to suggest you start smaller, not just because starting smaller is probably a better way to grow into that position if that's where you should end up. But it's because of the way I started. I started working at 15 years of age in a radio station in Tillamook, Oregon, that was kind of a funny place to work because it was on the edge of a cow pasture, and it had very primitive equipment, and I got paid the federal minimum wage of $1.85 an hour, which was at least a move up from my job at the furniture store when I was 14, working for $1.15 an hour, but it was a start. And I aspired to go up, but I thought, let's work this job while I can and get good at it and then move up. I would like to suggest that you run for the local offices, and the one I think that probably is the most accessible to all of you, and the one where you can arguably make the biggest difference, is the school board.
Oh, yeah.
And for a whole bunch of reasons that I'm sure you already know about, but when you run for the school board, it's a tough haul. Because the teachers' unions do not want that school board to do anything but get out a big rubber stamp and say yes to whatever it is the unions want, who represent most of the teachers in most of the places. In fact, I'm a big believer in charter schools. So you'd say, well, Lars, why are you suggesting that I run for the school board for the government, the traditional government schools, when you believe in charter schools? We may get to all charter schools someday, and I think it would be a good thing if we did. For those of you not familiar with charter schools, the one key aspect I see to them, when a charter school fails, it goes away. When a government school fails, it goes back and says, we're failing, but we'd fail so much better if you'd give us a lot more money. And then when you give them the money, as the legislatures of both Oregon and Washington have done over the last few years, billions and billions of dollars that they've fed into these failing institutions in the hopes that if you give another billion to a failed institution, it will fail less or succeed more. That has generally not been the case. Charter schools who fail their charter go away. And in fact, one of the answers I want to provide for you when you say to people we should have all charter schools, all of them, every single school should be a charter school, and when it fails, it should go away. They say the charter school failure rate is really high. I say, that's good. Tell them the answer they don't expect, but tell them for a reason. If you start a small business, if 10 of you in this room each start one small business, 9 of you are going to fail. Those are the statistics in America today. And America is the best place to start a business anywhere in the world because of our liberties, because of our courts, because of a lot of reasons. But 9 out of 10 of you will fail. But that's good, because the one that succeeds is the one that's found the right product or right service in the right way, offered in the right way to be successful. If 10 out of 10 succeeded, I can guarantee you that in socialist countries, when the government starts an enterprise, in say Venezuela, where the inflation rate is 1,000,000% per year, no joke, 10 out of 10 government enterprises do not fail. Now, that doesn't mean they succeed. They just don't fail because they're the government's enterprises. So after all, no government agency ever goes away. So while Venezuela is failing its people miserably, its government enterprises will never go out of business until the Venezuelan people finally correct things and change government, which it appears they've tried to do. So run for office, run for the school board, and do 2 things. Become a financial watchdog, because our schools are run imperfectly because they're funded very generously. And I would suggest that when your friends start saying, we have to put more money into education, tell them no. And then when they say, hold on a second, are you saying education isn't important? You say, yes, it is important. Right now, in Oregon and Washington, the average funding per student per year is between $14,000 and $15,000 per student per year. Now, what does it cost to go to the University of Oregon for 1 year as an in-state student? About 2/3 of that amount. How about UW? 2/3 of that amount. OSU, $10,000 will get you a year at OSU. $15,000, close to, is what will get you 1 year in a public school that has a dropout rate that they've managed to manipulate the numbers to the point where only 1/4 of the students drop out. It's 72% don't. And I can tell you how they manipulate the numbers, but they've managed to manipulate the numbers. Part of it is you don't have to pass an exam to graduate from high school. You pass individual tests, but there are some states that make you pass an exam at the end to show, have you actually absorbed something in 12 years? So you have an institution that gets almost, let's say it's the lower number, 14,000. That means in a classroom of 20, which we're told doesn't exist, because they're going to tell you they're all 50 kids to a classroom, which is a constructive lie, but it's a subject for another day. So you put $14,000 per student per year into a classroom. And here's the easy math. If there are 20 kids in that classroom, that's $280,000 going into that classroom. What's the teacher get? Salary and benefits, $100,000. Where's the other 180 going? They really can't tell you. Now, do you know the ugly truth? They're going to try an argument on you, and you should know the numbers to push it back. Part of this is knowing the subject matter and having intelligent answers, so when you spread the word to your friends, which is the old-fashioned, old school method of social media, talk to your friends. Tell them, they'll say, well, it's the disabled kids. They want to blame it on the mentally and physically disabled kids. That's also a lie. I've asked school administrators, what percentage of your kids are mentally or physically disabled? They say 15, maybe generously 20%. And how much extra do you have to spend on them? The average is another 30%. If you work those numbers, it still doesn't explain where the other 180 goes. Now, how can you have an enterprise where 2/3 of the money allocated to a task doesn't get to the task? 180 goes somewhere, 100 goes to the teacher. The schools, for the most part, are already paid for. This is why being on the school board and a run is so very important, because you can be a financial watchdog. And the second thing you can do is you can watch for a lot of the political garbage that is shoved on kids. God bless teachers. Some of my best friends, my mom died almost 50 years ago, so I was about 10. She died, at 50 years will be the end, December of this year. Some of my best friends were teachers. And God bless the teachers, but back in the day when we were all in school, they weren't pushing politics on you. And for all the schools that will tell you that they're so busy making sure that kids are taught the things they need to learn, and that they're so overloaded, then how do you have time to push, I hate Donald Trump, or the wall is a racist and immoral idea? How do you have time for that? When you're telling me you don't have enough time to teach them math and science and reading and history and a bit about the Constitution and that. If you have time to talk about your political views, you are wasting time that you should be using on kids. The second thing is that you can watch for those things, and when they come before the school board, you can be the lone dissenter. Now, it may be, optimistically, I'd love to see every one of you on a school board where there are 4 conservatives and 3 liberals, or 5 conservatives and 4 liberals, and I'd love to have that kind of split. It's not likely, but at least you can bring it to public attention, and you can be, the Greek word is ombudsman. It means to speak out, and they use that for various fairly good programs out there. But you can be the ombudsman. They can say, boy, if we vote on this, Larson is going to vote the other direction, or Burke is going to vote the other direction, but he's only one vote. Yes, but he can make friends in the press corps. He can make friends with talk radio. He can make friends with reporters. And if you're the lone dissenting voice, nothing reporters like better than having the lone dissenter who's vocal about why he or she dissented on that vote, and so said, no, we are not going to do this. And if you don't believe that the schools are actively being used, not just by individual teachers, but by the administration for these kinds of purposes, let me tell you what was pried loose from the Portland public schools as an example. When you saw all those protests last year on guns, on Trump, and everything else, and you thought, oh, a bunch of kids just got together and spontaneously said, let's have a march and walk out of class. And that was the story that you got from the school administration. We had nothing to do with this. It was a grassroots movement of these children. And then the documents were pried loose, the emails, in which the administration said, we are going to do this. So Adult people paid six-figure salaries as principals and administrators and superintendents in the schools decided to take your children or grandchildren and your money, because the time they wasted was your resource that you bought for the education of kids, and use those kids as political props, because they know that to people in my business, a child with a sign is very sympathetic. Well, I'll tell you something. I will guarantee you that I've never in my career as a talk show host, as a reporter, I just reported on what I saw and what I heard, but I put my own opinion into it now. If they went out and staged a protest in favor of the right to life using your children, I would oppose it. It is wrong to use children for that purpose. If they staged a protest in favor of the wall using your children and grandchildren, I would oppose it. Being in that position to be the lone dissenter to say, I don't want the schools to do this. And if we catch teachers who are proselytizing on whatever subject, whether it's gay rights, the right, so-called right to abortion on the wall, or Donald Trump or anything else, if you catch a teacher doing that, you straighten them out. You tell their boss to straighten them out, who these days probably doesn't want to straighten them out, and you tell them to fly right, or they're going to be looking for another job, period. So I'd encourage you to run for those jobs that are viewed sort of as lesser jobs, and to a large extent they are. They're thankless. They usually don't have a paycheck. They usually require lots of hours of reading and attending meetings and listening to the teachers' union scream at you, and having to take the unpopular view that no, kids should not be running the schools. It's fine to listen to them, but right now the Portland Public Schools are listening to the kids on the subject of school security. They actually voted to put off expanding their school resource officers to have cops in schools a year after the shooting at Parkland, Florida, where 17 people died, because we're listening to the kids and they say they don't want officers there who might charge a kid with committing a crime. Parkland, you wouldn't even know the name of Parkland, Florida today if school administrators had said, Nick Cruz has committed crimes in this school. He's threatened kids, which is a crime. He's brought weapons to school, which is a crime. And if they had brought the cops in on that and sent him over to the justice system, if he'd had to stand in front of a judge at 15 and maybe be put on probation, I'm not talking about throwing kids in jail, but I'm talking about having somebody course correct this kid, he might never have walked into that school and murdered 17 people. He did because school administrators said, we don't want to give a kid a criminal record. Well, he's going to have a criminal record now, but 17 people had to die to make it happen. And if they'd given him a criminal record and a little taste of a ride in a police car and standing in front of a judge and some of those things, it would have been better. School boards can make a difference there. You can do that. I want you to get on social media. Some of you probably already are. I'm on it, and I realize all of the deficits of social media. It has lots of them. It also has some people at the top, the folks who run Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and everything else, who are so politically correct that it's almost comical. And you say, but I'm up against all that. Yes, and yet still, it can allow you to communicate with thousands or tens of thousands, or in some cases, hundreds of thousands of your fellow citizens and get a message out. And if nothing else, you can do what I do every day, which is when some nitwit on Twitter says, we'd all be better off if the marginal tax rate was 90%, or we'd all be better off if we had Medicare for all, because having the same agents, the same government that runs Amtrak, the post office, and the DMV running your medical care is a sensible idea. You can get on and politely but directly, and maybe pointedly, say, this is why that's ridiculous. And if you get really good at it, to where you can pierce their little balloon of Medicare for all, and do it in such a way that nobody can fault the way you said it. Because we all realize, as much as political correctness has gone too far, that when we do these things and we use some kind of word, the focus becomes the word instead of this. In fact, last night I was talking about one poor guy who's become very popular on YouTube. I'd never even heard his name before. But he got thrown off YouTube because his last name is Dyke. And they said that's a slur against gay women. And he said, it's my name. My father-in-law's name is Van Dyne, so this guy's probably another Dutch boy. But they threw him off YouTube because of his name. Not because of what he was doing on YouTube, but because someone in the hierarchy of YouTube said, your name is a dirty slur. And I know, and we were having fun with it, because I said, the name Larson, and Larson technically means Lars, son of Lars.
Yes.
Well, obviously, that is playing up to the vast male patriarchy that has done so much damage. And since it's a white male, well, because as a Swede, I didn't get the blonde hair and the blue eyes, but obviously it's the white male patriarchy, and your name is, and then I got a call from I talked to Christian Toto, who's our movie guy. He writes some really great conservative movie reviews, and I said, Christian, you're in trouble, because clearly your first name is a reference to that evil religion tied in with white men who want to run the world. So there's a lot of political correctness out there, but if I could make those suggestions to you, that you run for those offices, that you support the people who are going to do it, that you get out on social media, that you spread the word, and that you push back. Taking the offense is pushing back, and it's working the problem, and do it sensibly and do it politely in a way that no one can fault the way you did it. Then all they can try to take issue with is the message that you're sending. And if the message is sent in a way that says, I'm taking issue with your ideas, not with your color, not with your gender, not with your sexual preference, not with anything like that, I'm just taking issue with your ideas, we will be able to push back against that. Richard's going to get the hook, or I'm going to get the hook. Richard?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all. And thank you for the ball.
You take care.
You bet.
Best of you. Yep, it's always great to have Lars here. This is the second time he's participated in the conference. Last time was in 2014 when he moderated a U.S. Senate debate. And he did a great job then, did a great job now. Thank you, Lars. Take care. So, very well. There are a couple things we need to do before we go into breakouts. We're going to have a presentation now from the Oregon Citizens Lobby. I'm going to ask Bob Soden to come up here, and he's going to reintroduce Mike Neerman, who's going to tell us how we can get involved as citizen legislators with the Oregon Citizens Lobby. And then at 1:40, we will start with breakout number 3. So, Bob.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I've been coming here since the beginning, and it's been always exciting. It was quite nice to get a reward for Cottage Grove 912. Basically, that's how I got started in 2009, by not really believing what was going on. And I was assigned, or I accepted the Issues Committee. So issues is my thing. Then the next year, 2010, I elected me chair of the group. I did that 2010 and 2011. And in 2010, the Oregon Liberty Coalition was created at a 912 convention. Okay, thank you. And I got interested in that. And then I was on the conference calls every week with an activist group, Freedom Works. And how many of you knew Wayne Brady? A few hands. Good. Well, Wayne Brady was on this one call, and he started talking about how ordinary citizens can become lobbyists. And Mike was over there working on his program, this Track Their Vote, and they talked about this, and I thought, boy, that's where I want to go. So I made a decision. I says, I can't be chair the next year. I'm not going to do that. I have to get involved in this, because it just sounded so interesting. It puts us able to look at these bills, and just all you have to do is read the bill. We told our legislators that before, is read the bill. And then we can get that word out through the Oregon Citizens Lobby website, and Track Their Vote is so crucial in keeping track of the legislators. How many here are volunteers for Oregon Citizens Lobby? Very good. And most of these are leaders. I see one of my analysts. I do the land use and economic development team. And it's a very rewarding experience. I'm going to let Mike go ahead and get his program started, because I know this This is the guts of the program. Thank you so much. And please come and visit our table over here and get a brochure and join us. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for your leadership in Oregon Citizens Lobby, too. Bob does a great job of providing leadership to this organization. So I got to say, you guys have heard of a bucket list before, right? Or things that you want to do before you die or something like that. Well, I have an anti-bucket list, This is things that I hope I never have to do before I die. So one of them was, I hope that I never have to testify in a committee in front of State Senator Betsy Johnson. And I had to do that last year. And so today, I'm actually fulfilling one of my other anti-bucket list items, which is to never, ever have to speak after Lars Larson. Right? Because he's good, though. Lars is good. But anyway, so to speak after him is tough. But anyway, I want to do just a little commercial here before I get started with Oregon Citizens Lobby. So back there in the corner, I got a little thing there. That's my wife there, Debbie Meerman, and we have 3 initiative petitions. Yeah, you should clap for her because, that's good. Because in our family, we have a little contest going on between the two of us of who's going to waste more of the public employee union money every year. And this year, she beat me. I'm still a little bit not over that. For 2018, she beat me. She wasted, several millions of dollars of public employee money. She was on that Janus decision there, she was one of the Amica brief filers on that. But anyway, I did the best that I could with measures 105 and 106. But anyway, so we have back there, we have initiative petition 10, which is to require a vote on all tolls. We have we have, and that's one of my chief petitioners there, Les Poole. You can sign it back there. We have initiative petition 11, which requires all school districts to offer a half hour of firearm safety by grade 6. And we have number 13, which is PERS reform, which says that no public entity can take on any debt to cover a pension obligation. So we got 10, 11, and 13. If you're wondering about 12, 12 is the Magic Mushroom Act, and you're on your own for that one. So. But anyway, if you get a chance, get back there and sign them. So I want to talk about Oregon Citizens Lobby, though. So this started a long time ago. I got to say, this started in my brain a long, long time ago. I want to say 20, 25 years ago. And this is obviously before I got in the legislature or anything. And I thought, the election's coming up. I need to find who my guy is and find out if he's a scoundrel or not or whatever, something like that. So I looked up who my guy was, my state representative. And then you go to the website. This is before OLIS or anything like that. And you start looking up. And all the information's there about what he's voted on, but it's not in any way that's possibly consumable by any person or anything. So you go there and you say, okay, bill number 2001, what was that? It's like moving a comma in the Department of Administrative Services code or something like that, right? Great, everybody voted yes on that. It was highly necessary, but that doesn't tell me if he's a scoundrel. So, okay, on to the next bill. This is changing the length of terms for the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission or something like that. Oh, great, that helps me a lot too, or something like that. Let's get to the guns and the guts and the God or something like that. But anyway, it's very hard to do. It's very hard to look up your state representative and find out if they're a scoundrel, right? There's an old saying that goes way back and it says, I'm going to talk about, this is a little bit partisan, so is Richard listening? Hope he's out of the room here. But they say all politicians live in fear Democrats live in fear that the voters will find out what they think. Republicans live in fear that the voters will never find out what they think. And so that's part of what Oregon Citizens Lobby does, is right now in this legislative session, already we have about 3,000 bills have been introduced into the legislative session already. 3,000, yeah, look at Larry's gagging on that. What about me? You think So anyway, so 3,000 bills. There's no way that you can stay on top of that stuff. Even with a staff, you can't stay on top of that stuff. So Oregon Citizens Lobby reads the bills. Our goal is to read every one of them, and some years we do that, and some years we don't. And but we rate them, we rank them all, and so we give them a score of, the most important is 10, and then down to 0 or whatever. And then we say whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. That's all. And a little bit of commentary on it. And so that the important bills bubble up to the top, and the moving a comma in the Department of Administrative Services code goes to the bottom, and so you get to see a picture of your legislator and say, now I can see if my guy's a scoundrel or not, And It turns out that a lot of your assumptions were correct about who's a scoundrel. But anyway, so that's what Oregon Citizens Lobby is. And so we're just citizens. I got my start on this before I was in the legislature, and I was doing this. But we're just ordinary citizens. We're not experts. Some people have a little bit of expertise here and there and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're just citizens. We just read the bill, do a little research, find out what it's about, publish a little thing on it there, and just move on to the next one there. And if you're interested in getting involved in that, we'd love to have you. And you can get involved as an analyst, or maybe if you're thinking, maybe I want to get involved, maybe I don't, the answer is yes, you do want to get involved. But we have like different levels of involvement, so you can bite off as much as you want, or as little as you want. And at the very least, we need you to get out there and share our stuff on Facebook so that people find out what the politicians think. And that's kind of a way that we move forward on this stuff, is we get that out there. Because you know, the guy who's in the district next to me, I'm going to pick on him. He's from another party that's not the same party as mine. I won't say what party that is or what party that I'm in there. But there's a guy who's in the district next to me, Paul Evans, and this guy's a master at hiding from the voters what he thinks and what he does and how he votes and all that. And if people knew that I don't think they would send him back to the legislature, you know. And I think if people knew what I do, I think they would send me back. But anyway, so go over there and sign up over there, and we have a lot of fun doing this. We have a war room, so every Thursday in the Capitol, in room 350, starting this week, is the kickoff week there. At noon, we have the war room's open all day to use as like a base of operations there, so if you need to use it there. But every Thursday at noon, at room 350 in the Capitol there, we've got the war room presentation there, and sometimes it'll be me, John, at you or whatever, but it'll be kind of some little facet of a presentation on state government or whatever. And I have to tell you that the most effective thing, and I'm speaking as a state representative, when this is done to me, it's the most effective thing, is constituents who are in my district, who care about it, care passionately about an issue, and come to me to talk to me personally about an issue there. That is tough for me to say no to, and that's tough for me to fight against. And so whoever your representative is, whether he's a good guy or a scoundrel or something in between or whatever, is to go and to make a personal visit to them to say, hey, this bill or this issue is important to me. And if you lean on Oregon Citizens Lobby, you'll have a little bit of the homework done for you there, and to do that. That's the most important thing to do. And the emails and the telephone calls, those are all good too, but we have to let these people, including me, know what you think of what they're doing there. And that's how we kind of turn this ship around, because we've got a lot of ship turning to do. So, does anybody have any questions on that? Yeah, Joe Ray.
Mike, so on the petitions, and I know you'll be able to answer this, so I don't remember if I signed petition number 10.
Oh,
sign it or don't sign it.
Oh, that's a great point. That's a great point. So you remember about like 10 years ago, they said, oh, if you sign a petition twice, some baby in Nepal is going to die, and the sea levels are going to drop, and the Secretary of State is going to invalidate 8 billion signatures because you signed it twice. Right? Does everybody remember that? Does everybody remember that mythology? Okay, thankfully that's not true today. So what happens is when you sign that petition, we put them all into a database there, and then we run a little program that finds all the duplicates on there. And so when Joe Ray signed it once, and it's kind of confusing sometimes, because I don't know if you remember the no taxpayer funding of abortion? I think that one had like 3 tries before it ever got on the ballot there. So there was what? So 6 tries, okay. But anyway, that one, and so you can sign each one of those, but you shouldn't sign one. So it's kind of hard to remember, did I sign this one or not, or whatever. But now, so it's not legal to sign an initiative petition more than once. But why would you do that? There's no advantage to doing that. But if you are not sure, just sign it. We'll find the duplicates there, and we will cross them off. And so that's a good question, Joe Ray. And by the way, Western Liberty Network is not endorsing any of those initiatives back there, but I am. So, yeah, Les.
I know you don't have time to talk about your hockey championship. Could you give out real quickly the website for the Vote on Tolls?
Yeah, so it's www.voteontolls.com there. Yeah, and then And you can go there and download a petition there, so we're off and rolling on that. So here comes the hook over here. Any other questions before I get the hook? So, good, so I hope to see you in the breakout sessions there, so thanks.
Look at my light bulb burn out. Okay, we'll worry about that later. Okay, how's that for a lunchtime program? That's good. I've been told that Catherine Timpf has checked into the hotel, so she is here and she will speak in her slot. But for now, we go back to school and we go back to our breakouts. It is breakout session 3. I want to remind you again, please, to fill out the evaluation forms and lay them on the registration table when you're finished. And let's go do some more of this stuff. Thank you very much.